Hello, all. Welcome to study 93 of the Solving Studies to Improve Chess Calculation series. I believe this is going to be an interesting one. It's a composition from the Ukrainian chess composer Sergiy Didukh. Not only a good chess composer, but he also has a really cool sense of humor when he comments other endgame studies, a bit on the dark side, without filters. But I really love it. And in fact, it was because of some articles he wrote that it brought up my interest in finding more from his compositions. This one is going to be hard, I believe, but nevertheless, I suggest you watch the guide so you are better prepared for the solution. And as always, the countdown will start and I catch you with the solution. And here you are, and as always, let's start with the first right move, which is, of course, Rook B2 check exclamation mark. Okay, this endgame study, it's not easy. It's very hard to find the proper solution. It's very deep. And Diduk is also known by introducing to us what's called the thematic wrong try, the thematic false tries. And basically, that's the way we are going to find the solution for this one. We are going to try several variations. We are going to understand that they don't work, but we are going to learn something from them. And with that new information, we are able to come to the first starting position and try to improve from there. And so basically, it's the pedagogic lesson that he bring us is that go with the wrong tries, see what you can learn from them. And let's see the first one. The first one is to go and to try to control the pawn that it's threatening to promote to a queen. And here, black has this simple maneuver, checking the king goes to the side, and now the knight blocks the access to the f1 square, which forces the rook to come back. Now the king moves away, of course, it was check, and rook is forced to sacrifice now. There is no other way to go and control the promotion. And here, as you can see, now we start the second phase of the study, which is can the two knights and a pawn beat the other pawn? And here, yes, they can. Basically, the idea is going to be simple. One knight needs to protect the pawn, and so after it can promote, and the other knight can go and control the promotion of the other one. The white king is in a difficult task because either he wants and comes to help the pawn promote, but of course, one knight can sacrifice for the pawn if on the other side the other pawn is free to go to a queen, of course. And so, if the king goes to take this pawn, which should be very, very good for white, well, then the black knight needs to find a way to protect it, which is not that hard. Also, another important thing to remember is when we are playing two knights against a pawn, let's say, for example, this pawn is lost, okay? We are having two knights against a pawn, then we should remember the Troitsky line. Troitsky line is a line where we should block the enemy pawn so we are able to win. And here the pawn has already crossed the Troitsky line. How can we find the Troitsky line? Well, we start by the fifth rank, and both sides, the rook and the center, are the Troitsky line. So imagine the pawns over here, and then we just go diagonally backwards. And so we find this is basically the Troitsky line. If you don't know, you can search a bit about it, but this is a thematic line from the two knights against a pawn and games, which sometimes allows the knight side to win. And here, as you can see, the knight should be blocking the pawn on this square. So white is in a good situation because the pawn is already above the Troitsky line. Remember the Troitsky line again. And so this is also something we can review from this endgame study. Okay, but now let's see what happens from here. Let's say, for example, the king goes directly to help our pawn. So we are on the wrong try, remember, and we are going to try to see how to learn from it. It brings the knight goes check, and now as you can see, the pawn is starting to escape. Notice that the square is this one, so the king has no way to come back or and leave the pawn, so advances the pawn, but now we are controlling the pawn. And when the king goes, notice that the idea is going to force the knight always to move away, but now black can simply go with the other knight. That's the simplest solution. Advancing the pawn also works, but I prefer to go with the knight. And the idea is we can connect the knights on the c5 square, because now this knight doesn't need to protect this pawn, as the pawn is already threatening to promote. So white here may try to come back, but now we simply protect our knight. We have tempo for it. Now notice that the king can't approach the pawn anymore, so needs to go out. And when it goes, it's going to be easy win for black. So this was the wrong try, where we saw that, okay, if we go directly to control the promotion, we are going to be targeted with this maneuver and then sacrificing the rook in a bad way. So here we are forced to go with the second try, which is to check the king. Okay, now the king needs to come down, and now I sacrifice the rook in this situation. But what can we learn about this one? Okay, we saw already that the king going, helping the pawn, was not enough. And so the idea needs to be the king go after the other pawn. There are more than one way, but the only good way is to attack the knight. So this is key. We are not wasting tempo, because we are forcing the black knight to also to move. And the idea is to go through this path. And when the knight comes here, if we grab one knight, then have tempo to approach our pawn and try to promote it. Let's see that in action. Here, black also needs to find the barrier only move, which is this one. Notice that now I have a barrier over here, so I can't go with my intended plan. So I need to use my pawn to attract one knight. Of course, the other knight is going to leave now because he needs to control the advancing of the pawn. It was check, so I can come here. Now, of course, black to play again. Now it's controlling the advancing of the pawn. Notice this one. And now I can win another tempo by attacking the other knight. Of course, the knight moves away, checking me. Okay, now I am going directly to the pawn. Notice that if I can catch this pawn, this is going to be a draw, because the pawn is more advanced than the Troitsky line that we already talked about before. But here, there's no time for white to grab the pawn, because as soon as he attacks the pawn, I come with my knight. And now notice that the knight is protecting the pawn and the other knight is controlling the advancing of the other pawn. But of course, white has more ideas. Now I am attacking this knight. Of course, here black needs to leave the knight, so the better option is now to advance the pawn. So notice that now the pawn is unstoppable. So the king takes the knight, and now let's see how this ends. So we attack the other knight. Again, we should not waste any more tempo with it. So just a bit calculation, okay? And now notice that we are able to go and promote also our pawn. But what happens is, in the end, we promote, but then we suffer this check. The king is in the way, and behind him it's the queen, so we take the queen and it's game over. But over here, we also learned something. We were able to find a way to promote our pawn. So this second try was wrong, but also instructive. Why? Because if I promote over here, notice what happened. This king is on c1. But if it was on b1, this would be wonderful. Okay, let's go and see this in action on the starting position. So again, we check the king comes to c1, and now instead of taking the pawn, the smart, very hard move is to go to a2. Why? Because we want to attract the king to the b1 square, and now the maneuver will work. So we are coming to f2, sacrificing our rook. Now we attack the knight. Again, the knights need to do this blocking. This is the only way to avoid the king to come taking one knight or the pawn. So white advances the pawn, which forces the other knight to get out there and control it. Okay, the knight is going there. Now I attack this knight, so check, and now I go after that pawn. Now, I need to be careful. If I went to the other side, this just allows another check and a winning of tempo, and so not what we want. We need always to count moves. And over here, of course, it's black to play, and so we are also going to see this one just so you can see that blocking the pawn is too late, because this guarantees that we are able to block the pawn, but also shows that we are going to lose our pawn. And then I can show you very fast. Well, we are going to control the position, of course. Here, as you can see, we are already blocked, but there's no way black is going to be able. We just need to move the king to one side or another. There will not be tempi for the other knight to leave without we force it to sacrifice and or take our pawn, which is going to be a draw. So the knights only can win if they keep this pawn and then place our king in a corner where he can't move anywhere, and bring the other knight to checkmate it when it's in a corner without moving. And so those tempi are only possible if white has one move with a pawn, which we are not going ever to allow. So over here, after the check, we go to h4. The knight comes to e4. Now we attack the pawn, and now the knight protects the pawn. We go with the same idea. So now we are attacking the knight. The pawn advances, and at the same time, we are threatening to come and promote. And at the same time, if the knight tries to, for example, move in front of the pawn, then I can come back and take the other pawn. So we are playing. Notice that the path was really interesting. We are playing with the geometry of the board, going with diagonals, which is very important on this kind of end games. And so after here, of course, the pawn advances again. So over here, I think I have the moves over here. So we take the knight. Now the pawn advance. We advance again. The queen promotes, and of course, when we promote now, it's check, because the king was in the wrong square. So it's a draw. Okay, this was not an easy one, of course. This is never easy. Uh, but I hope you also have extracted some lessons from the starting position, where the tries, the false tries, the one that we sacrifice, the one that we try to control the promotion, were important for us to improve our knowledge about how to solve this one. This was not easy. If you haven't, don't worry. I was not also able to find it on the first time. It took me a lot of understanding. Also, the knights versus pawn end game is also not easy. So if you are with doubts about that, I suggest you come more or less to this position and try to play it from here, because this is not easy, or at least for a more or less like here, because you are always going to learn how to control it better for future over the board situations similar to this one. Okay, I won't bother you more. Hope you have enjoyed, and see you in future studies. Bye bye.